All right, it's 3:30, so we're gonna start. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We're so happy you're spending this afternoon with us. Today's topic is belongingness in remote work setups. And just some reminders before we start. We're trying to make this interactive, so have another device or be ready to go to another link. We're going to use Mentimeter. And all participants, although you will be on mute, please type your comments in the chat box. We love reading your comments. Like Sir Ramirez here, he said, good afternoon sa lahat. You can also type your questions in the Q&A and we'll definitely get to answering your questions. And lastly, if you answer the post evaluation, you will get a certificate. Just write your full name because this process is automated. So we're positive workplaces, and our mission is we co-create cultures that enhance the well-being of the Filipino workforce. Especially now, well-being is so important. And we imagine this is going to happen through positive cultures and by creating positivity ripples. So it starts with leading yourself, and when you're able to lead yourself, you can lead others. And when you're able to have that influence over some people, you start leading cultures. So there's a change in culture, and when that happens, you have the power to create positive workplaces. So, hello, I'm Nikki Vergara. I'm the Chief Wellbeing Officer of Positive Workplaces. I studied a Master's of Applied Positive Psychology at the University of Melbourne, and I studied a Master's in Counseling Psychology from Ateneo. And all of the things that I've learned over the years, I'm trying to condense. But definitely, I will not be able to condense and share that with all of you without experts who actually practice this on the ground. So, over the course of this series, we had a series on the elements of well-being. We had Cherry Poo Africa talk about competence. We had Angela Tan talking about his experience on autonomy. And today we're really lucky because we have Kaisa who will talk about relatedness. So I'm going to introduce Kaisa. Yes, Kaisa, you can say hello. And Kaisa is the program lead for inclusive leadership and school effectiveness on Beyond Education. She did her Master of Education, specializing in leadership and management from the University of Sydney. But I kind of want to see more things about Kaisa. So actually, she's an experienced project manager, researcher, and consultant in the field of teacher development, inclusion, and education leadership. Fun fact, I have been bumping into Kaisa since 2013, I think, because of her work in education. And she's a program lead for inclusive leadership and school effectiveness for Beyond Education, an organization that aims to create inclusive schools and inclusive societies, not just through capacity building and technical support for development organizations and government, but also by walking the talk in developing a workplace where each member of the organization feels safe, valued, and empowered to shape the organization and its goals. And that's why we invited Kaisa here today. Everything that she tries to do for society, she's doing inside her workplace, and she's going to teach you all about how she's doing that. She's also a core member of Kapet Guro, a community of teachers with a common desire to create a nurturing space where teachers can celebrate who they are, what they do, and find strength and inspiration in each other's stories. So if you're a teacher, and you're interested, please also look up Kapit Guro. It's a community that Kaisa has set up. And yeah, so Kaisa, say hello.
Hi everyone. Happy to be here. Thanks for introducing me, Nikki, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to share what we've been doing in our own organization. Hopefully, you can pick up something from the practices that we have, and it's something that you can take away with you and apply in your own organizations as well. So, thanks, Nikki.
Yay! All right, I'm so excited. She's gonna share those tips. But first, I actually borrowed one check-in prompt from Kaisa. Please go to menti.com and use the code 6626216. And she has also pasted that in our team member. She has also pasted that in the chat box, or you can turn on your phone, scan that QR code, and it will lead you to this page. So I got this check-in prompt from Kaisa. She and her team start meetings this way. So the check-in prompt is right now, fill in the blank. Hi, ang sarap mag blank. Or hi, ang sarap, for instance, for me right now. Hi, ang sarap kumain ng ice cream kasi ang init-init. And I'm actually been craving. So one person said, ay, ang sarap, malapit na ang long weekend, ay, ang sarap mag milk tea, My gosh, soul sister or person, kindred spirit who said kumain ng ice cream. Sarap ng Jollibee Chicken Joy kahit bawal. I'm sure you're craving. Sarap matulog. Kaso may trabaho pa din yung iba. So, yeah, check in right now. What is it that you really want to do right now? And again, we're gonna keep going back to Mentimeter. So don't close it anymore on your phone, so that it's easier to access when we ask you other questions later on. So it looks like right now, maraming gustong kumain. Food, sleep ang hinahanap ng mga tao. Very interesting. All right. Thanks for checking in. So our key points for today is we're going to talk about why it's important to feel like you belong in the workplace. And then we're going to talk about some threats to relatedness and how you can boost relatedness at work. So first, I will go on and tell you about the self-determination theory, especially for those who haven't been able to attend the other webinars of the series. So people, as we know, have that capacity to be active, constructive, curious, full of life, self-motivated. These are the people who are trying to do their best to make the world a better place, or they're trying to master something, or they're just trying to do a lot of good. You see that people can really be at their best. But at the same time, we see the opposite of that. And we see people who are passive, who are indolent, who are apathetic, who are alienated, and who are irresponsible. So we see a whole range of people. What the self-determination theory's assumption about people is that everyone has the spark. So it's the question is not how do we ignite that spark in people to be their very best. Everyone already has that inherent desire to be their best. Everyone has that spark in themselves. And the argument really is if it's already there, all that we need to do in the environment is create those facilitative conditions for that spark. That spark is there, it's in everyone. You don't need to be the origin of that spark for another person. But what we can do for each other is to create facilitative conditions to nurture and nourish that spark. So they argue we can actually design social environments for the optimum development, performance, and well-being of individuals. So we're not leaving things as they are because we have a hand in designing all the conditions to help people become their best. So, what are the conditions that foster versus undermine human potential? That then becomes the questions. What can we do to really foster the best of the human potential? And we've said before many times, the research, decades of research have found that if there were three very, very basic ingredients for motivation, it's competence, autonomy, and relatedness. And an acronym you can use to remember that is CAR. Competence is really about being able to have that opportunity to do something that you're good at, having that opportunity to master something. Autonomy, I know, has been restricted in the pandemic because autonomy stands for being free to choose. There are many things we're not able to choose right now, but in the last webinar we talked about if you focus on the things that you can control, then that circle of influence will expand and your autonomy will expand. Autonomy is having the agency to direct your path. And lastly, it's relatedness, and that's feeling like you belong somewhere, feeling that you are cared about, feeling that you are part of a group. And those ingredients for motivation are our very basic psychological needs. So it's not just in the workplace that we need it, it's in all aspects of life. We're looking for these very basic psychological needs. And today, we have a special guest, Kaisa, who's going to talk to us about relatedness. And before she shares the tips from her organization, I'll just go through some questions with you on Mentimeter again so that we understand you better. So ayan, someone said pala earlier, ang sarap magbasa. um, ang sarap ng fried banana, someone said. You're so lucky, I wish I could have that. So my first question, which of these basic psychological needs do you think is most supported in your workplace? Is it competence, autonomy, or relatedness? Of all of those three elements, usually in different areas of our lives, one area is more supported than the other. And my question is, in your work, which, if you could rank these three, which is the most supported, the second supported, and then the third supported? There are different organizations with different priorities. And I would say in my work, yung pinaka-supported ay relatedness because we spend a huge chunk of time checking in on each other, supporting each other. It's our basic. It's something that we said is very important. So I think in our organization, at least as I experience it, it's a big source of feelings of relatedness, and I think that's what we prioritize so far. And it looks like it's the same for other people who have answered as well. Most people have answered relatedness to be their top, competence as their second, and autonomy as their third. Kaisa, I'm actually curious. In your workplace, I know you're here to talk about relatedness, but in your workplace, which of these do you think is most supported?
I think I would agree with you guys that related in our workplace, it's also relatedness that is most supported in our workplace. But then I can't help but think that they're all interlinked and interconnected.
Yeah.
So sometimes I think maybe later when we talk more about it, maybe we will be able to see how each of the different components actually foster relatedness.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think we do some things that still lead to relatedness, or it's kind of hard to like make them fit into neat categories. But I think I would agree generally that in our workplace, it's also relatedness.
Yeah, interesting. And that's a very interesting point because even the research says each of these components support each other. So if you take out one component, the other two components will really suffer as well. So Kaisa makes a really good point, and that's why she shows a more integrated example in her suggestions later. And then we're gonna ask the people some more things like these are questions that I got from the basic psychological needs scale, and this is one way that people assess relatedness at work. So here are the questions, if you can answer. Would you say you really like the people that you work with? I don't want to ask, guys. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you want to answer, you can do that.
Yeah.
So people are saying somewhat true. Two are saying very true. So far, none has said not at all true. And I know my
Yeah.
colleagues are here, but I'm not saying this just to please them, but I really do like the people that I work with. That even if I didn't work with them, I will probably look for them and hang out with them. That's how much I like. That's how much I like them. Yeah. What are your thoughts on this, Kaisa? Do you think it matters that you like the people you work with?
I think it does matter. This is really interesting. But I think it really matters, especially as Filipinos, no? Kasi we're very relational eh. And pero I don't think it's just Filipinos because I've been reading this book with about Gallup Strengths Finder. And then one of the things that characterizes a good workplace for people is someone if they have a buddy or if
Yeah.
they have a friend at work. So I think it makes sense, and I think it's important that people like working with the people that they're working with. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's something that we're definitely we have to be concerned about at work as well, liking each other. About this one, do you think people? Can you answer? Do you get along with people at work? And I think it's so these all these items are actually measuring the same thing, but there are you could have a different answer here. Kanina, do you like the people you work with? Maybe you like them, but you don't get along with them sometimes. So, what is your answer here? Do you get along with people at work? I love my workmates, and I think we argue a lot, because we come from different perspectives. But at the end of the day, we do get along. Yeah. Ikaw, Kaisa, in all of your work, is this something that you've experienced that you always get along with people at work?
Mm, generally, yes. And I think it's also because the team that I work with are usually small. And
Mm.
the person who hires us are purposeful in hiring the people. So they don't just look at the competencies, but also how people would get along with each other. So
Oh,
generally, yes. But I think it's conflict is all right too. Like it getting along, yes, is important. But I think it's okay if we disagree, and I don't think that counts as conflict or not getting along. So yeah, so discourse is okay, and yeah.
interesting. So discourse or disagreeing with each other is perfectly fine. But when
Yes,
you
yeah.
think about putting a team together, especially now that you're more of a leader putting teams together, this is something that you think about. Will this person get along with the team?
Yes, yes. I think it's about aligning values as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Because, I used to think, never mind these things. But then when I made those mistakes as a recruiter, oh, all hell broke loose. Now my next question, and I think this is super relevant, especially now that we're dealing in a pandemic. I pretty much keep to myself when I am at work. You say this is not at all true, somewhat true, or very true. Kaisa, I'm curious what your answer is because I know you can be quite an introvert some, but I do know relatedness is valuable to you. Which one of these would you answer?
I would say it depends. So it depends on the task, but our work and I guess the culture that we have at work requires us to bring people along. So we do have meetings a lot. We do foster connection with each other, and we do have structures for that. But I guess I would say it would depend on the kind of work, because there are kinds of work that you need to do independently and you need to do on your own. But then I guess part of being in an organization, especially our organization that's um, work from home talaga, home based talaga, even from the beginning. Part of that is being purposeful as well in how we connect with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think my answer for this would be somewhat true because there are times like you when I need to keep to myself so I can do the deep work.
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel like when I'm with a team, I'm stronger. So my answer would
Mm.
be, it looks like three people here say very true. They keep to themselves. Six say not at all true, but six also in the middle. And my last question. I consider the work I consider the people I work with to be my friends. What's your answer here, guys? If we're allowed to ask you that.
Yes, yes. The people that I work with are really my friends. Also because um most of them, well, the founding members are really my friends, and we started the organization together, and I don't think we would have started it together if we were not friends. So yes, the people I work with are my friends, and I think that really helps a lot in terms of building relatedness at work.
Yeah, and I do know when you leave a workplace, because we're Facebook friends, and I just see your network and your activities, that even the people you don't work with anymore, they are still your friends. Like you've been able to carry on with that friendship.
Yeah, yeah, that's true too. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say medyo the same din ako. The people I work with are my friends and I would still hang out with them even if I weren't working with them. So one person said not at all true, seven said somewhat true. Sometimes they're nice to hang out with, sometimes maybe not so much. And five people said very true. So the five, you're very lucky to be working with your friends. Makes work feel less of a burden. Okay, this pala is my very last question. People at work care about me. And I think this is a very, very important thing, especially if you are someone coming into the workforce for the first time. I always advise to my younger siblings that if you could pick a workplace where people care about you and are concerned about your growth. Um, how about you, Kaisa? Is this something that you thought about when you were entering one of your first job? Let's say your first job.
You
Is this
know,
something?
not really. I
Mm,
mean, it wasn't on the top of my list. Like, I looked for a job that I was interested in, but then later on I realized, especially now that we're building our own organization. I'm in our own organization. I realize how important it is to make people feel that they're cared for and they're supported. So it wasn't on top of my list when I was choosing a job, but I realized that it's really important.
Interesting. And I think across all of the patterns that people have answered as well, um, parang normal curve then. Like we get a few people saying not at all true, some people saying very true, but a lot of people just saying somewhat. So no matter where you are coming from right now, no matter how you answered any of these questions that we asked, all of the tips that we're sharing here with you are actually going to be helpful and relevant because you can start from where you are. So this is not just helpful for the people who are answering very true. It's going to be helpful for everyone. So listen in. All right. So I'm just gonna go through some questions. Like the first, why is it important to feel like you belong in the workplace? Because something that a lot of people ask is why can't we just focus on the work? Because we are not being paid to socialize anyway. We're being paid to work. So why should we actually care about relatedness in the workplace? On a biological level, the part of your brain that activates when you experience physical pain, that part of the brain research says is also activated when you experience isolation. So what your brain feels is actually like your reality. So in reality, isolation, it literally hurts. Sometimes you can feel just how painful it is to be left on your own without people caring about you. And on a biological level as well, when you have social contacts with others, the brain releases a neurotransmitter called oxytocin. It's the same neurotransmitter that is released when you cuddle, when you have a newborn baby, because this neurotransmitter is linked to motivation and helping and trusting others. So in the workplace, this neurotransmitter is linked to helping and trusting others in the workplace as well. So it's so important for us to have that social contact because trusting and helping each other is important for the work that we do. So we need this neurotransmitter to be activated for us to be able to work together and reach our goals at work. And the lack of social support actually leads to worsening health. So people who have not a lot of social support, research shows have a higher risk for cardiovascular disease. They have a compromised immunity, increased risk of depression, and a shortened lifespan. So if you think that it's just food or cigarettes that you need to care about for your health, no, if you really care about your health, you should actually think about your social contacts as well, your social interactions. They help with your health because if you have positive social interactions, your cardiovascular, immune, and neuroendocrine systems are improved, according to research. And more so, especially if you're the one managing the organization, you should be thinking about relationships at work because they lead to attachment to the organization. So the satisfaction from workplace relationships can lead to greater attachment to your organization. And this is so important because if people are not attached to the organization, then they leave, then they're absent, and they don't do their best work. And that really affects the bottom line of the organization. So increasing social contacts, like creating informal gatherings, they can improve employee satisfaction, which improves connectedness and attachment to the org. And social interaction boosts employee engagement, and this leads to lower business costs down the line. Mahal mag-replace ng taong umalis. To onboard again, to train again, to go through that learning curve again, or to have people make a lot of mistakes because they're not engaged, that actually is costly. And if you have social interactions and higher employee engagement, you have improved performance outcomes, and there's a lower staff turnover and absenteeism. So if you think that all of this is just fluff, it's not, because it really matters to the bottom line of the work in the organization. So managers, you should be thinking about how you can help people engage each other more. So before I go to the tips, we will talk about what are the threats to relatedness, and I'm curious what your perspective is. So please go to menti.com. Again, the link is there, the QR code is there, and the question is, oh, sorry. What are the top two challenges that hinder relatedness in your workplace? Ikaw, Kaisa, in your life where you didn't have a lot of, in the all of the work experience that you have, in when you did not feel a lot of relatedness, what do you think were yung challenges mo that kept you from feeling more related?
I think one would be how I think one would be the culture. Sometimes, you know how sometimes in organizations there are cliques.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So parang sometimes there are already established ways of doing things that are relating with others that are not really helpful, or you know how sometimes we like to joke in the parang put each other down in a joking way.
Oof, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Pero joke lang naman, 'di ba?
yeah,
Pero
yeah,
sometimes it makes you feel like you second guess yourself, and you second guess what people think about you, and you second guess if you really belong in the organization. So I think that top of mind, those are the things that come to me when what would make me feel like I don't belong in an organization. Yeah.
yeah. And I can just empathize with the people who are onboarding right now, no? Like if you were onboarded well and there was a group that already welcomed you, you don't feel the clicks as much, like what that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
You feel like you belong in a group somewhere. But so
Yeah.
you watch out for Kaisa's tip about onboarding later. And I think people here, they're saying their top two challenges that hinder their relatedness are toxic people. Most people are saying that toxic people. So I think even without intending, like you said, Kaisa, yung mga medyo they say a joke that kind of put you down. I think even without intending to be a toxic person, you can have that
Yeah.
toxicity to someone else if you're not mindful about the effects of the words that you say. So I think that's the top thing that keeps people from relating better. I think I personally relate most to too busy. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you're just focused on the work and the outcome, to be honest, work never ends. So I've learned that work never ends. So I should actually just schedule in other important things like relating to each other. Now I know that, but before, no. I just said I'll just start talking to people when I stop being busy, but I never stop being busy. And yeah, and eight, and then followed by poor communication, lack of trust, and the remote setup. So it looks like the remote setup is not the main barrier that people experience right now. And now, the most important part is really the how. So, how can you boost relatedness at work? And for this, Kaisa is going to share so many things about what has been working in her organization. And as I said earlier, Kaisa has been in a remote work setup even before the pandemic started. So, her organization, they're 10 steps ahead of all of us because they've been planning to doing it this way. So everything that they've learned, what works for them, Kaisa is gonna share it with them. So Kaisa, my first question is, how long have you been working in this remote setup?
Hmm. I think it's been 3 years, 3 to 4 years. Yeah. Yeah. So it's been quite a while already. And it comes from the function of the work since most of our clients are international. And we don't really need a physical office. So we've had to work with what our current setup is, which is working from home. Yeah.
Before you worked in this organization, you were working somewhere that had an office where
Yeah.
you could see your workmates. So,
Yeah.
what was that adjustment for you, knowing that you like relating to people? It's important to you. What was it like making that jump from working in an office to working remotely?
It was really hard. Kasi it's like suddenly you're just faced with reports and you're just faced with the work and you don't have anyone to talk to. Whereas if you're in a physical office, you have a workmate who sits next to you, and if you're confused about something, you go to your boss or your supervisor and you ask that person a question, and you can easily call for a meeting. You have a whiteboard that you can work things on together. So it's hard not even having lunch with others. So it was quite an adjustment. And then at first, I think I put it down to the nature of the work because we do a lot of report writing and we do a lot of research. But then now that we're a bigger team, I realize that it's not about the nature of the work itself, but how we can build relatedness into the work structure and into our systems, because otherwise people won't feel human anymore if it's really just work that you're thinking about. So yeah, that's my experience of going into another organization that's mostly work from home and desk based, and we still don't have a physical office.
Yeah. So it's a point of reflection then for the people who are watching. If you're challenged with your work right now, consider maybe is it really the nature of your work, or is it could you be missing this very basic ingredient of relatedness, as Kaisa has also realized. So yeah, Kaisa, take it away. This is your first step in building relatedness in your organization.
All right. So the first step is really to look at the culture that you have, no? So I think sometimes when we think about how we can build relatedness, we automatically think of tips, like separate tips um, that we may have for others. But then I realized that building relatedness is really about looking at the culture and the values that you have as an organization. So it's not just about identifying practices that you can do, but also it's about looking at the values, looking at the culture, and then building this into the processes and the practices that you have. So it's not just one thing. It's really a whole systems or a whole organization perspective in terms of how we can build this into the processes that we have and the practices that we have. And I realized that I mentioned to you, Nikki, that not everyone might be coming from the same context that I am, because I'm in a startup and we're a small team. Although we've already expanded, some might be in bigger organizations, and you might have a team, but your team might be part of a bigger organization or a bigger team, and it might not be up to you to identify or maybe define the culture. But then I really believe that a good leader is someone who can protect the workspace for the team. So we always exist within a context, and there are always external variables that we're going to be reacting to. But then a good leader should be able to create a workspace and protect the team and protect the work, so that you create a culture that would really make people feel that they belong, and make people feel that they can participate, and make people feel that they can contribute. So yeah.
Yeah, and I really acknowledge that there may be people here who are coming from organizations with thousands of people, and you are stepping into that existing culture. But as Kaisa said, even within the context of your own team, you have that power to create culture. I know from my own experience that I entered a very bureaucratic organization, which had its own culture on its own. But the culture that mattered most to me was going to be the culture of my team. And I was just mindful, like, could my boss create the kind of culture that I want? And given that, it didn't matter what the culture of the whole organization was, because in that small team, that's really the culture that affected me the most. So you could build your culture of relatedness, and this is Kaisa's tip on that.
Yeah. So how we did it in our team is we knew that we already had somewhat similar values because we started an organization that works within inclusive education. So one of our key values is inclusion, or making people feel that they belong, or creating systems of support so that everyone is able to contribute. But then we realized that we really needed to identify the values. So not just our own personal values, but the team values as well. So we had a strategic planning session, which was very helpful because that session, which was run by a good friend who really works with organization and working with cultures and values, um, it was helpful because we were able to identify not just the team values, or not just the values of the organization, but our own values as well. And then we were able to reflect on that and connect how these show up in the workplace, and how we identify with the values of the organization as well. So I think it's helpful. Like, first step would be to really sit down and go through a process of reflecting your own values and your own culture, and then seeing it in relation to the self-determination theory. So maybe in this context, because it's a broader thing, no, values, and they're all interconnected anyway. So how do we build connectedness through our values? How do we build autonomy through our values? What are our values, and how can we is it really working for us? Is it not working for us? So, and connecting that to something that we believe in personally as well, so that it's personal.
Can you share with us what is that culture or value that really anchored a lot of your practices in your organization?
I think one would be inclusion. So like what I mentioned, we work within the field of inclusive education. So inclusion means making sure that everyone feels welcome, everyone feels that they belong, everyone feels that they're working to their strengths and are supported to work to their strengths, so that they're able to contribute in the organization. And then another thing I feel is the value of honesty and trust, because trust is really I think trust underlies a lot of the processes that we have, in the sense that um we trust that the person is there to do the work. So we don't really micromanage, or we don't really monitor a person's hours since we work from home, diba?
Yeah.
So um not because we feel like the person doesn't need support, or that person is independent, but because we trust that the person will do the work given the right environment, and he or she is motivated enough. And if that person is not doing the work or not delivering the output, we ask the person. We go into conversations like, what's going on with you? Are you okay? How can I support you better? So the conversations, as you can see, will also have an underlying value of trust. So when someone's not performing, or someone's not doing the work in a way that's expected of that person, we don't automatically go into monitoring mode, or parang we don't automatically go na siguro baka natatamad siya, or even if natatamad siya, bakit, 'di ba? Like, if the person's demotivated, why? We just believe that people who are motivated people are motivated by themselves, in terms of they have intrinsic motivation, and sometimes you just need to create that environment to for people to be able to tap into that internal motivation that they have to do the work.
Yeah.
So I think trust is a big value that we have, that I can really see in how we relate with each other.
Interesting. And I'm curious too, and I want to ask the audience as well, if you can type it in the chat box. which values in your organization or which culture do you think you can anchor on so that you can build more relatedness in your organization? Because I can definitely resonate yung just highlighting that your value is trust. Because if I was in an organization na if I didn't reply or if I didn't do something, their immediate assumption is tamad or like
Yeah.
wrong with you, then of course I will have strained relationships with the people in their organization in this organization because they don't see the best in me. So she said from the chat box, she said compassion is one value that we anchor on for because she is part of our team in positive workplaces. And if we talk about creating a culture of well-being, we're helping others champion creating a culture of well-being, we really have to walk that talk. So compassion is a big one. We talk about we always check in on each other and ask each other how we can better support each other. So that's a value that comes to mind. Christine LNC said respect. That's a wonderful one. No, if you actually say that your values are respect, then you wouldn't come from a place of attacking or looking at the worst in each other. Is this what can you say about this value, Kaisa?
Yeah, I agree. It's really about I think respect boils down to valuing the person for who he or she is. So it's also about knowing the person and knowing the strengths of the person, and sometimes it's also connected to expectations.
Yeah.
So respecting someone means also being like knowing the person's strengths and not going beyond what's expected for that person. And I think it really works to have respect because it also would reflect in how you speak to that person, yeah, and how you work with that person.
Yeah, and it's just such a basic thing, no? Like I think
Mhm.
respect is a basic foundation for all good relationships. Arnold Aga said sharing is caring. I do think that if you're very generous with each other in the workplace, then that really helps create good relationships, positive interactions. And yes, this is continuing with what you said, Kaisa.
Yeah. So we were able to identify our values, but then aside from identifying them, we realized that for them to really be exhibited in the organization, we would need to align our processes and our practices with the values that we have. So, for example, since we value trust, it also follows that we value people's perspectives,
Yeah.
and since we value inclusion, we value participation, and that we include people in decision making because we want people to feel like they belong and we want people to feel like they're shaping the organization. So, how do we do that? When we're very flat in terms of the organization structure,
Mm.
um, there are decisions that are made at the SMT level or senior management team level. But a lot of the decisions, even though we've made decisions at the SMT level, we still bring the decision points to the team and we still talk through them so that it's not very top down. So I know that some people might be coming from a more hierarchical organization, but I think there's a way for people to feel included in decision making or make people feel heard, and not just have a memo that says these are the things that you have to do and this is how we're doing things. Sometimes it's really just about creating venues for exchanging ideas. So we have a lot of meetings that would we workshop a lot. We do a lot of workshops. So even policies, things that we're deciding on, like processes, we even workshop those. So it's about aligning the values to the practices and the processes as well. And if our value also is fostering inclusion or belongingness, we something as simple as starting meetings with check-ins. So we do that as well so that people can talk about what's important to them or what they found meaningful that may or may not be related to work. So, like the check-in question that you had, Nikki, earlier, the hi, ang sarap mag. We have, yeah, we have questions like those so that we get to know each other, and also so that people can talk about what they did during the weekend, talk about their family. So we kind of bring the personal into the professional, and I don't think, if it builds relatedness and if it creates a sense of belonging, I think that fosters not just good relations but productivity as well.
Yeah, yeah. And can I just say, I can really feel your value of inclusion come across even in the way that you share your ideas. Because even if you're sharing it in your context, you're so aware of the context that might be left out, which is like the more hierarchical, bureaucratic organization. And then you kind of include them in the discussion about, and you tweak your advice and make it also appropriate to them. So I can really see how your values align even in the
Right.
process of sharing with us right now. So
Mhm.
this is one of the things that you shared with me yesterday. Can you talk to us more about how you create opportunities for participation using Google Suite, I think?
Yeah, so we do create opportunities for participation. Like what I mentioned to you earlier, we do a lot of workshops. And even though we're doing it online, it hasn't hindered us from brainstorming or from being creative about things. And we used to miss like having meta cards. You know how you have cut up or post its and then brainstorming together. I mean, I don't think I think we would still love to do that, but then some members of our team are not in the Philippines. So we really do have to work with what can be found online. So one way that we do that is through Google Docs, which I think is a tool that's available to almost anyone. We use Google Docs a lot, not just through creating output or writing reports, but we use it more for meetings so that people can see what's every. It's like a running meeting um, notes of what's going on. And then we also use it for brainstorming together so that people can write down their thoughts. And we also use Jamboard a lot because what we like about Jamboard is that there you can use post-its, you can put in images, you can even write down using a pen, and we can even put shapes and diagrams. So we've been using Jamboard a lot, and that's been helping out in terms of creating venues for participation in the team, even if we're working remotely.
Yeah. So for people who don't know, Jamboard is actually part of Google Suite. So
Mm-hmm.
a Google account is free, therefore Jamboard would also be free for you. And you know what I love about post-its is even if not all of the ideas on the post-its will be implemented, just the very fact that you sought someone's thought, perspective, and opinion is enough to make them feel included and that they've participated. Because even if you can't accommodate everything, at least you sought it out, you considered it, and people had that opportunity to have their voice heard.
That's so true, Nikki, no? Kasi I used to belong in an organization that's very hierarchical. And then sometimes you really just want to be heard. Alam mo yun, you really just want to be consulted. And then if it can be explained why that suggestion won't push through or won't be considered for the final decision, then that's also okay. But at least I was heard. And I think that's really important for me as well, being able to participate and being able to feel heard. Um, that's also why I feel like I create that space for participation for others, because I've known how it feels to be disenfranchised or to not be heard or to not be asked about my opinion, even though the decisions would impact me, right? So I think a lot of organizations go through that as well. And you're right that it's important to ask people and involve them in the decision making, even though the decision might not be in favor of what they were suggesting. So yeah.
I like that you're that type of leader because you know there are types of leaders who are I'm gonna do this to my subordinates kasi ito yung ginawa sa akin. But you are I felt how bad it is to feel disenfranchised and I'm gonna make sure other people won't do that. So you are more aware about how to create opportunities for participation. I have a comment here sa chat box from Marilyn Lim. She said, treat or regard your workplace as your second home and your colleagues as your extended families. That way, closeness would ensue. Yeah, very interesting. And I think that's also like the way that Kaisa is when you're in your workplace. That it's not just people you work with; they're actually people you care about, people you would continue to relate with. So that's a wonderful tip. Thank you for that, Marilyn. And yeah, going on to the next theme, Kaisa.
Okay, so the next theme is cultivating support. So, um, I feel like this is one of the guiding principles that we have in the organization is that we try to create a supportive workplace for everyone, like each and every member of the team, because we really believe that when people feel supported, that's when they can contribute best. And when people are not, when they're demotivated, when they're disengaged, then that probably means that they either lack the support that they need to be able to perform the work, or there's really something going on with them, and it's not about because it's not because they're incompetent. So it's still about seeing people from the perspective of possibilities, and seeing people from the perspective of strengths and contribution. And that's why we create this environment that cultivates support. So that's one principle that I feel is part of is really ingrained in how we do things. And one example for this is we've created an onboarding survey. So I don't know what the onboarding. I've experienced onboarding processes before, and they're usually like workshops on when you get your salaries, the financial papers that you need to, like the templates that you need to fill up, the health and safety regulations in the organization, all the rules and regulations in the organization, and um, we we do have a webinar on the kind of work that we do, the values that we have, which is part of the onboarding. But we realized that we needed to find a way to get to know the people who are coming into the organization and also who are already in the organization, so that we're able to support them better. So we came up with an onboarding survey, which there are some sample questions here. So the onboarding survey is really for us to get to know the person and the person's strengths, the person's preferences, what makes the person feel supported in the team, what makes a person feel unsupported in the team, and what is it that, in terms of the nature of the work that we're doing, what would they say would already be strengths, and what would they say are things that they need support in. So it's always coming from my perspective that we're here to support you. Tell us how you want to be supported, or tell us how you work and what works best for you. Tell us your strengths, so that these are the things that we can highlight in the work. Tell us what you're interested in cultivating in yourself, so that we can support those goals. So we came up with this onboarding survey. And once you fill up that survey, you'll also be able to see the survey results of other people in the team, so that you also know how to support them better. So it's not just one way, it's about having that space for everyone. So this might be something that you would want to try out.
Yeah, I love this. It's only recently that we started doing this, because prior to doing an onboarding survey like this, it could be a survey like Kaisa, or it could just be a meeting where you
Mhm.
actually discuss
Right.
these things amongst each other. Because beyond all of the how do you fill up your forms? What are the rules in this organization? These things are so important, and you can imagine how much heartbreak it can save everyone. Because for instance, like I I like I let my team know that I can be very direct with the feedback that I give, but it
Mm.
doesn't mean that I'm attacking you. It just means that I want to be very clear about how you can grow. So the next time that someone gets feedback from me, they remembering that conversation, they know that they don't have to worry if I'm mad or displeased. They just know, because I said it, that I'm really just interested in their growth, and that's why I'm going to give this feedback. So it saves a lot of heartache. How has this method worked for you personally, guys? Like, was there anything that you were able to articulate that helped you smoothen out the relationships in the future? Because you already said it in the survey.
I think it really helps in terms of having clear communication, no? Kasi we realized na before, nangangapa kami. Like, we would be, so would this person be okay if I talk to him or her this way? Or would this person prefer a text feedback? Would this person prefer a call? Would this person feel too confronted when you give feedback in front of the team? Like, so if you put it out in a survey, then you realize that there are different things that work for different people. And it's like in a classroom, diba? There are different learning styles. Within a workplace, there are also different ways of what would work for different people. And this has allowed us to be more upfront about things and to communicate what would work for us better so that things would work more smoothly. And we also don't have to like second guess in terms of is it okay if I call this person in the morning to ask how she is and how what she's going to do today, or would that person feel overwhelmed because she doesn't like being asked all the time kung kamusta na siya and how the work is. So it allows us to gauge what would really work and allows us to communicate our needs as well.
Yeah, I love that. And you know, if you do something like this, then you and people follow it, you do feel like those people care about you. So thanks for sharing that. And this one.
All right. So another way that we make people feel that they belong in an organization is we align work to their strengths and capacities. So we don't just assign work randomly. We also have conversations or have discussions with the person in terms of how would you feel about doing this work, and then we also scaffold work according to strengths and capacities. So, for example, we try not to throw people in the deep end. So we're aware of what the work would entail, and we break it down into um, how simple it is to how complex it is. And then if because we usually have short-term consultants for certain projects, and when a short-term consultant comes in, she's kind of he or she's kind of like it's very fast-paced. So you can't you because a project will run for maybe 6 months lang. So that person needs to adapt quickly. So we break down the work in clear ways, and we consider how the person would work best. Because some people would work better if they're independent. Other persons would work better if specific tasks are given to them and broken down in like small digestible components. So we align works based on strengths and capacities, and these are the things that we consider before we have a person work on a project. And when that person's already working in the project, we have conversations with that person and we check what would work best for them. So I guess like what I said earlier, it's like learner centeredness, but more of like working with adults and human centeredness so that they're able to contribute best to the organization and the project.
Yeah. And you know, there's Gallup research that says that if you align the strengths to the work that they do, they're 6 times more engaged. And you're right, they do contribute better. And when they feel like they're contributing to the team, they feel connected to the team. Because I think if you throw them in the deep end and then they don't know what they're doing, there's a lot of emotions start cropping up, like shame, like, oh, why can't I do this? Or
Yeah.
you start feeling like shame, embarrassment, or you feel like you're letting people down. And that really is such a deterrent to feeling connected and related to people at work. So it's so amazing that you guys are so mindful about people's strengths and also what work they can do to really let their strengths shine.
Yeah, so the next thing is that we build mentoring into the role of the project lead. So if you're managing a project, if you're leading a project, you don't just look at the technical aspects of the work and making the project run smoothly. You also look at each person and how that person is contributing or not contributing, how you can support that person better, the goals of the person in terms of professional development. And it's also having a feel for how each member of your team is doing. So are they feeling overwhelmed with the work, and how can we adjust the work so that um, it so how can you also build their capacity for the work? So mentoring is built into the role of the program leads talaga.
Yeah, I love this because then if you put it as their job description, then if you've been intentional about that, then they would also be more intentional about mentoring people they are guiding in the
Right.
project.
Yeah.
And your next theme is
Is connecting. So just making sure that there are opportunities for people to connect, not just professionally, but also personally. So we know that this helps foster belonging, and it also helps with the productivity of the people. And we do this through organizing group chats. So I don't know what kind of group chats you have for work. Um, but we have group chats that are not work related. So we purposefully created a chill chat where we share with each other our thoughts about like current events, or what we want to buy during our next sweldo, or or like what's happening in our personal life. So think of it as like pantry conversation. You know how when you go to the pantry and there are people there and you start doing small talk. But then since we don't have a pantry and we just work in our own homes, how do we it just emerged naturally actually. How do we it kind of replicated that physical setup na you meet in one place and you talk about things candidly. So we have a group chat for that. Yeah.
interesting. So I actually want to ask the audience now on Mentimeter. So go again. The link is going to be posted by Chi. Scan that. And the question is, if you were to have your own like chill chat, or if you have, what are some group chats you can make to create more conversations? So Kaiser's is chill chat. And you know what I like about this? If you make a bunch of threads, I know it can be overwhelming, but people can opt out of these threads naman. So
Mm,
if they're saving
that's
their
right.
money and they don't want to know what you're buying for your next well, then they can opt out
True.
of that particular thread. For instance, salmon, realizing now that parang we've been eating more, not working out as much. Starting December 1, we're gonna make a thread, like a fit fam thread where we're just gonna be
That's a
posting
good idea.
about healthy things we're eating. We're gonna be posting about the workouts that we're doing to hold each other accountable at work. And again, if you don't like that kind of stuff, you can opt out. Ayun, chats for those with similar interests. I'm curious to know, what do you think are those interests? And for the others who find it hard to go on Menti, you can definitely type your answers in the chat box because we are looking at the chat box as well. Ayan, someone said a group chat of musically inclined colleagues. Interesting. I guess you're sharing stuff about, music sheets. I'm not musically inclined, so I actually don't know what you would be talking about there. Yeah. What are some things here that you're, oh my gosh, what are some things here that you resonate with, guys?
Hmm. I guess the one with similar interests, but then we do have like because we're friends, we do have similar interests as well. And then online shopping definitely because a lot of the conversations in our chill chat group is really about online shopping, but to the point that we we needed to balance it off with like tips for saving. So aside from talking about how what we want to buy next, we talk about how we're saving up and our progress in saving up. So yeah,
Nice. Because I
yeah.
talked earlier about how social interaction really creates it allows the release of oxytocin. Now that we're not bumping into each other anymore, this thread is still that opportunity to connect with each other, have those interactions, release those oxytocin, and it will benefit you later on because you're having these informal conversations in these threads. You actually feel more trust and more willingness to help each other after. It's just
Mhm.
how the human experience works. So someone in here said for mothers, And I feel like there's a strong social bond between mothers these days, especially mothers who have to homeschool while working, mothers who have to do so many tasks on top of their typical duties during the pandemic. So definitely create, if you feel that you can share mommy tips with each other, and so you won't be in other group chats with people who don't
Right.
have children, just create your own group chat. I feel very afraid for this um, group chats. Do you mean you are the bosses and therefore you need to have that executive lounge? Or do you mean that you're going to talk about your bosses? I'm a little scared. I'm a little scared about that group chat. I hope you're sharing good things about your bosses, no? Kasi kung mahanap nila yung thread nyo, di ba? um, Ayan. So another person said for your favorite merienda, favorite movies, favorite TV series. Because like Miss Marilyn a while ago was talking about fried bananas. So the
Mhm.
banana's not too ripe when you eat it. The edges are crispy. We slice the banana before frying, like the shape of a fan into four leaves. So this is the kind of like dessert chat conversation that I want to be a part of. So Miss Marilyn Lim and I can be totally hanging out in that conversation. And if the others aren't interested in merienda, you can make your own group chat. But people who are talking about food trip, yung bakers group, I'm in on all of those chats. And here naman, another person suggested a platform. So it could be on Viber, Messenger, or Skype. So you could have an official work platform for work related things. But if you want to engage your friends, your work friends, you can use those other platforms as well. So these are wonderful tips. Ayan, this person said, aside from group chat of our department, we also have group chat separate from the other group. So your department has two groups. The one who loves to have two bottles every Friday, and the group who doesn't drink alcohol and they just love to eat. So nag-split sila. So yeah, one for the people who want to drink, they hang out while chatting,
Right.
drink while chatting. And the other one who just loves to eat. Ito naman latest food, fashion, and pang-negosyo. I'm counting on you to start these actual chats amongst yourselves. And this is guys' next tip.
We also have different meetings. So we purposefully set meetings not just for technical meetings for the projects, but we have culture building meetings. So in these meetings, we use it also as a venue for building participation. So we talk about how we want the if there are things that are not working in the organization, we talk about that. How can we make things better? We talk about that as well. We actually use the design thinking tool, Nikki, which is your rose thorns buds. So we use that. Yeah, from Happy. We use that to talk about certain things that may not be working for us, so that everyone can voice out their concerns. And we also use those kinds of meetings for games. So it can just be something like we know that people are feeling a bit stressed. So we would have a game afternoon that someone can host, and then we played Cards Against Humanities online, which kind of it's kind of strange playing that with workmates because it's not really work friendly, right? But it's fun. It was fun. And then we also have project send offs. So a project send off is it allows us a venue to celebrate and remember the team's wins in a project. So when a project is finished, we create a webinar. And in that webinar, we talk about the timeline of the project, and we have people um, say how they were able to contribute to the project, which point in the timeline they came in. Kasi sometimes, especially for long and big projects, not everyone works in the same project at the same time. So aside from the project lead, some would be in the beginning, in the middle, some would be towards the end. But then it's really just nice to have that venue for people to share how they contributed towards one goal or one output, because we're not working face to face, we're not working in one office. So sometimes we would have we would go for several weeks without these meetings. We can go for several weeks without talking to each other. So it's so important that we build into our processes the different meetings, but also in the project send off, that people get to see how everyone's outputs come together, or how everyone's contributions come together towards one output, so that they feel that we're working on the same thing even though we're not together. So that's how we're trying to work with the distance, or not being in a physical office, by through celebrating these wins and people's contributions as well to projects.
I love that. And I think among the types of meetings that you've shared with us here, yung project send-offs talaga yung pinaka-rare na nababalitaan ko that happen in the workplace. Most workplaces, as soon as the project is over, then it's goodbye. It's like, then it's out of my mind. I'm on to the next thing. But you're so right. If you, especially in a remote setup, if you're doing most of the work on your own, it can feel very isolated
Mm.
until you have that project sent off where you acknowledge everybody's contribution and you really see that you are a part of a big thing. So that boosts feelings of belonging and relatedness. And I really, really love this idea. I must steal this. So my team,
Yes, please.
please, let's steal this. Let's find a way to steal this idea. It's so good.
All right. So another thing is that we have in our shared drive, we have an entertainment folder. So this came from the pandemic. During the beginning of the pandemic, people were feeling stressed, and then being a team that, well, like one of our participants said earlier, that your value is compassion, and I think our team also has compassion as a value. And since in the beginning of the pandemic, everyone is feeling so stressed. So we did allow ourselves to chill, and we didn't push ourselves too hard to work. And part of that, it resulted to an entertainment folder in our Google Drive, where we get to share movies and books, so to each other, that we've been reading, like ebooks, so that we can talk about these things and also share what's keeping us entertained.
Yeah, interesting. So it's something that people can easily set up. But like, what I'm curious, what kind of movies and books would you share to each other? Because definitely, if you have a shared folder of movies and books, then you would have more conversations about these movies and books. You could even create your own book club, ganyan. So if you have ideas, do share it with us. I just want to read out earlier when we were talking about not the non-work related thread. Melanie Servo said she named her chat group HR HR to talk about non-work related stuff. So that's really interesting. So make cute names like that as well. It just creates a more bonding culture. If you create, what's yours? Guys, a chill chat. You know,
Ours is because our organization is called Beyond Education, so we call it BE Chill. That's our chat. Yes.
Oh, okay. See, even come up with those cute names, HRB, chill. That really creates a culture of like, hey, we're in this team. We're naming ourselves something. So try that cute name that Melanie has shared. And that really brings us to the end of the sharing, at least. There are a couple of questions here, a lot. There's a number of questions here that we're going to be answering right after. So if you have questions, please put it in the Q&A tab. So just to summarize, it's really important to feel like you belong in the workplace because belongingness is a very key ingredient to motivation, and motivation is linked to performance, to engagement, to attachment to the organization, which leads to a lot of good bottom lines like productivity and less costs in your organization. There's so many benefits. Work shouldn't just be about work. Work should also be about cultivating relationships with the people that you work with. And there are many threats to this. Kaisa said, like, you could have a culture that's very cliquish and doesn't make people feel like they belong. Sometimes you're too busy. Sometimes you hesitate to connect with other people because they can be toxic. So, um, although these threats are present, there are so many interventions that you can use. And Kaisa shared with us so many interventions that have worked. So you imagine Kaisa has been working in a remote setup. So it feels like Kaisa is almost like our ate, not necessarily in terms of age, but in terms of her experience in working in a remote setup. You know, sometimes you can learn from the best practices or even the mistakes of an older sibling or someone who has gone ahead. And Kaisa shared with us a number of tips from um, being very mindful about the culture that you're building, even if you're in a big organization, you can create a micro culture. Find ways to cultivate support and connect with each other. And thank you so much, Kaisa, for being here with us today. Are you ready for the questions that people have for you?
Sure, I will try my best to answer them.
Yeah, and we can answer some together. Um, I'll go with this question first. How do we make friends when professional connections are important in some workplaces? Like, I guess it's a balance. How do you balance making friends when professional connections are
That's true.
important? That professionalism. How have you balanced that in your experience? And again, we're just sharing these tips. Um, you, of course, everyone listening still has to, follow the wisdom of their own experience and their own heart. So, what's your thought on that, Kaisa?
I think I don't think they go against each other in the sense that you can build connection and still be professional.
Yeah,
And I think it's also about your own culture and your own comfort level and the people's comfort level around you. Kasi 'di ba, parang you can't be chummy-chummy naman with people who don't want to be chummy-chummy with you. Alam mo 'yon, parang it's all about like I know that these things work for our organization because we're a specific set of people, and these people like feeling connected with each other, and these people like feeling like they're a close knit group of friends, but it may not work for everyone, and it may not work for each setting. So I think connectedness might look different for different organizations and different sets of people, but I think what's important is identifying your values, and then identifying values that are aligned to connectedness or to building connection or relatedness, and belonging. And then looking at the practices that you can create that you'll be comfortable with and your organization would be comfortable with. So it's not like a one size fits all
yeah,
thing. It's more of looking at what would work for you.
yeah.
That's my thought on it, Nikki. Yeah.
Definitely, I agree with that. You have to still be mindful of your culture in your organization. So, for instance, if you're very formal in your organization, then maybe that group chat on like what food, like you can't invite your bosses to a group chat about what food you want to eat for lunch. But if you can get a sense if maybe that would work for you, you can pick among all of the strategies that were shared here today to see what matters for you. But what is very clear is connection, relatedness is important. It will just look different in different
Mm-hmm.
organizations.
Yeah.
The next question: how can you make leaders in HR feel that they are also cared for? It's sad that it's kind of rare for people to check on them. Maybe because most people think that it's their job to take care of everyone and making sure that everyone's okay.
Would you like to take this, Nikki, since you used to be in HR, right?
I've not actually been in HR. I'm curious to see also your opinion, but I will
Okay.
share some thoughts on it. Na sometimes even as the head, the leader, or the HR, you also have to orchestrate these things. So what you can do, for instance, in HR, if HR is taking care of the rest of the organization in terms of all of these needs, then there should be a small team, a sub team, or a person in HR who doesn't take care of the rest of the organization but takes care of HR. So you could institute a role for a carer of carers, because it can't be all, your energy can't be all out there.
That's
There
right.
if you had a role to for caring for the carers in the organization, then someone will be tasked to be mindful of people like leaders in HR as well.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on this, Kaisa?
For me, it's also about um, being vulnerable as a leader. So we have a thread. Syempre puro thread, no? Kasi we're all online eh. So we have a thread for what you would call maybe the middle managers in an organization that's more hierarchical or that's more corporate. We have a thread for middle managers, and in that thread we can be candid about our challenges and challenges in mentoring people, challenges in managing projects, feelings of not being adequate enough to do the work. So really having conversations that might be difficult, but I realized that it's in these difficult conversations where you can find most support.
Yeah, yeah.
But you have to allow these conversations to happen. So and then we realized um, that we do tend to create a front of
Mm,
competence
mm,
in even within an organization such as us. Now we're very candid and we have this culture. We still do tend to create a front of competence. Pero one thing that I realized just recently is that it helps to have conversations to say that I'm having difficulty with this and I actually am not okay. Can I take a break? And then people start gathering around you and giving you support because sometimes you're not given support because you don't show that you need support.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's where this person is coming from. Maybe as a leader or as an HR, you have to show that front you said, guys, and parang you have to
Hmm,
put this face that you've got everyone is gonna be fine because you're there. But
definitely.
we're not Superman, not all of us are Superman. So Kaisa's suggestion is to create a support group amongst those people, among the HR, among the leaders, so that you can find ways to support each other so that you're not always extending support outside, you're also supporting each other. Or, like one research said that I cited, you can assign a nurturing role for the nurturers, a carer for carers. You can assign that. So I hope that answers. I hope that gave you some tips towards and finding ways to deal with that. Next question. Okay, so this one I can also help with. One employee in the office raised depression and anxiety affecting her performance. The boss wants her to be checked by a psychiatrist or psychologist immediately. I think that is not proper as an initial reaction from a leader. Kindly comment. Everyone comment on that, guys. Have you ever experienced something like that?
Not really.
Right.
But I'm thinking if it was something that happened in our organization, I think I think it's all right to have a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but I think the person has to be the person. It shouldn't be top down in the sense that it's like the I think I think what matters is how you work in terms of the discussion and the conversation.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So it's not like something that this is what you have to do, but
yeah,
it's more of like how what support do you need. Again, the even just phrasing it matters. So how you phrase it matters. So I think
yeah.
if this were to happen in our own organization, I would probably talk to that person and ask, oh, so what are you doing for it? What the office is here, the team is here. What support do you need? Are you seeing anyone that can help you? So that it doesn't feel prescriptive, but
Mm.
it's coming from a genuine space of concern. And um yeah, so I think as a leader, that's how I would probably deal with it.
Yeah. I thank you for that tip that Kaisa shared because definitely there's an art to bridging people to healthcare providers like psychiatrists and psychologists. So we don't know the full context of how this conversation emerged, but it would be nice if somebody said that, like they feel that they're experiencing mental health problems, then there's an art towards asking them how they are, being curious, being just genuinely curious, and with a helpful disposition. And but I do believe that it was correct to link this person, or at least to raise in this person's mind the possibility of connecting to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, because they mentioned specific mental health concerns, which was depression and anxiety. So it really depends then on the policies in your organization.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on the organization, if your organization has a policy for it, that you need to be, some organizations need a psych clearance before they can come back to the office after they reported feelings of feeling mental health concerns. So maybe that was the context in which this emerged. But I think the spirit is just, it would always be great to link people back to the people who can help them. Just do it in a kind and caring way would be a really nice thing to do. Right. Another person asked, there are bosses who count our output and compare it with what they do. Oh, how do we address this? How do we initiate culture change? So ito yung mga bosses na parang, kaya ko yung gawin. Kaya ko yung gawin. Bakit di mo kaya gawin? May tips ka ba doon, Kaisa?
It's hard if I feel like it's hard if it's easier to give tips if you're coming from a position of leadership and if you're talking to leaders. But then I do recognize how difficult it can be in different contexts na it's not as flat, or it's more hierarchical, or there's a culture of the boss is the boss. Ganyan. So I do understand how difficult that can be. But I think one way would be to have I again this would depend on your context because you would know your boss best. So I think one way would be to have honest conversations. So I don't know how scary that may be. I mean, I don't know how if that would work even because it would. I don't know your boss. I don't know the dynamics within your organization. But then I think and I also don't know how open the communication lines are. But I feel like it always pays to be honest and to say what's working and what's not working for you.
Yeah.
Um, that's my thinking about this. Or maybe if there are venues for example, to your HR where you can give feedback or you can give inputs in terms of how you can work better, then maybe that's another way if you can't go to your boss directly. Also maybe peer support I think is important as well in creating culture change, so it doesn't have to come from the leader but it can come from you and your workmates and setting your culture together. So maybe that's another way that you can look at it.
Plus one ako dun sa communication,
Yeah.
because you can kind of see, although it can feel harsh the way that this person wrote it, na bosses count your output and compare it with what they do. I can feel na the value, you can kind of draw what is the good that this boss is trying to do. Because, people are not irrational. They're not doing things just to hurt you. And I can sense that this boss is probably showing values of productivity and
Mm-hmm.
using competition as a way to bring out that value. Like if I can do it, you should be able to do it. It really depends on the tone, no, of how people speak. But at the very least, you can acknowledge that I can sense that you want me to be more productive and to do these things. But then these are my limitations. And that's why I'm not able to do what you do. I don't have your strengths, I don't have your resources, or there are other things on my plate. Just having a conversation can really help you put both of you on the same page so that your relationship is not strained. um yeah, because I can already sense that there's some strain in that relationship right now with the way that this conversation has been laid out. So if you could have a more open communication about it, I think that would really help. Yeah. And then next, Is there such a thing as too much relatedness? Should there be a limit to relatedness for a work friendship balance? What do
Hmm.
you think, guys? I don't know the exact reason. I don't. But yeah,
I think too much relatedness. I think relatedness works, or I think we need to look at it in terms of what would work again for your organization and for the individuals in it.
yeah,
There can be too much relatedness if it's not working for you and if it's not working for the people that it's meant to serve, because the reason why you're building relatedness in the first place is so that people would feel more comfortable with each other and would feel more engaged in the work and would feel like they're contributing to something bigger or greater, or so that they would find meaning in the work. So there can be too much relatedness if people are not comfortable, I guess, in how things are being like set out in the work, or how maybe it's like crossing personal boundaries already, and
yeah,
that's also not good. So
yeah.
there's always a balance to things, and it's always about finding what works for you and what works for the people that you work with.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. There's always a balance to things. So, are there any more last words you'd like to share, Kaisa, before we move on to some announcements?
Okay, so um maybe that connectedness or belongingness or relatedness takes different forms, and hopefully you were able to take away some insights from our conversation or discussion today, so that you can find what works for you and what works for your organization in building an organization where everyone feels included, where everyone feels safe, and where everyone feels like they can contribute because they feel like they belong and they feel like they're connected to the people that they're working with. Yeah, so thanks for this opportunity, Nikki. I hope that this was helpful for people who attended, and I hope that you were able to pick up some things from what I shared. So thanks again for having me.
Thank you so much, Kaisa.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, so
Bye.
rush to another meeting, but thank you so much for being here. I know I definitely learned. So some
Thank
announcements
you.
before we wrap this up. We've done the Q&A. You can follow us on Facebook if you're curious about the other things that we do, the other webinars that we'll have in the future. January, we've already plotted some of our December, we've plotted some webinars around making good resolutions for your future in line with that New Year's theme. So keep an eye out on our Facebook page, facebook.com/positive workplaces ph. And actually, Miss Teresa Garcia asked earlier, how do we assess strengths and capacities of employees? If you're really curious about strengths, we actually have a program for that. It's called the Strengths Based Leadership Course, and it comes with your Gallup Strengths Assessment Top 5. This is one of the strengths frameworks that can be used to assess what are the strengths of the people in your organization. And I think of all of the things that I studied in positive psychology, this is my favorite. This is my favorite one that I really hope more people would learn about. It's that you can have a strengths based approach to things. So if you're interested in this, you could register now. The QR code is on the screen, or you could check out our Facebook page and our website, positiveworkplaces.org, for all of these details. And you can take a screenshot of that. It's going to be a really, really exciting seminar, webinar, and our slots are actually running out. This one is selling really quick. So if you're interested, please reach out to us and sign up. And yes, so that's it. That's it for our webinar. I know we have maxed out on our time. We're so grateful that you were here with us today. And please answer our evaluation link, post evaluation form. It was put in the chat box. And we really read all of the comments that you have for us. And we use everything for our ideas for the future as well and for our improvement. So thank you so much for spending this afternoon with us, everyone. Take care. Bye.